What's poppin', players? Welcome back to a TwoPennyGames review. This time, Warhammer 40k Space Marine 2. I am your host, Tavin Bothel, sitting here with my good friend, co-host, and lead reviewer. Say hello to the people, Connor Elliott.
Some people would say 40,000, but 40K, I think that works.
It's a lot of words. It's a lot of words.
40K, that's simple.
You know, it's simple. Real simple, simple.
Most people call it that.
Connor, you've been playing Warhammer 40k Space Marine 2. See, long word. Long title.
Just say Space Marine 2. Then.
Space Marine 2. Well, you've been playing Space Marine 2. Well, you got to say it for your intro here.
I do, yes.
Yeah. I might cut that short, too, actually, because TikTok is a lot of seconds, a lot of seconds.
True.
Anyways, you've been playing Warhammer. I have not. Have you beaten Warhammer?
I have.
You
the main
have.
campaign. I played a little bit of the Eternal War mode, which is just regular multiplayer, and one operations mission. I wish I did more of that, but I kind of wanted to play it with friends, and I couldn't get together with any until yesterday to play that. And so my experience is limited, but I still have enough to say about it.
Fantastic. Well, I'm very excited to get into it. So why don't you go ahead and take it away, my friend, with your Warhammer review.
Warhammer 40k Space Marine 2 is a great game. So as someone who played the first game not that long ago, maybe about 2 years, as a fan of 40k and knowing that it was one of the better 40k games, I went and played it. And it's a bit of a dated game in some ways, but it's a very fun game. And so when this got announced and it was looking even prettier and better than the first one was, I had pretty high hopes. And this improved upon the first game in literally every single aspect, which is pretty impressive. Well, I guess not one, kind of. So the thing that had the most impact on me with this game is this is coming at a time when we've had some conversations about missing the old days. We might be nostalgic and, it might not be as good as it is, but I remember there was a time, we all do, we both do here, of when you had a single-player game. It maybe wasn't that long, so you can get done with it and have a fun time with it, and then you had a multiplayer mode that you can sink however much time you wanted into it. And that model had kind of gone by the wayside. Typically, you're getting either a multiplayer game or a single-player game. And this is one of those games that the creators themselves said that one of their goals was to kind of make games like that. The more, as I just described, games. And not only does it do it, but it does it well. As I said before, the campaign, which I beat, it's very short. So short, in fact, that it just comes in with fun gameplay, with some fun enemy types, and before they can get boring, you're out of there, And that's pretty good, because the narrative isn't much to be, remarked about. The first one was actually better. This is the only way it was, and a large part of that is because it's a sequel, and it does come back from the first one, 100 years after the first one. Space Marines can basically live forever, so that makes sense. The character in the first game, he was a part of a military group, basically, that has very strict rules, but he kind of bent them. He, was a little bit more rebellious, but still in kind of like a, I'm a military officer kind of way. He ends up getting screwed over, and so this game is him kind of learning to gain trust in his brothers again. Because as you are a Space Marine, you're a part of a brotherhood. And that brotherhood betrayed him in the first game. And so it kind of lends to him not having enough of a character because they're spending so much time dealing with his strife carried over from the first game and him trying to establish a connection with his wary team members. And so you don't get to know the characters as well as you should have been able to know them. But thankfully, it doesn't really spend a lot of time focusing on this, except like when you're riding elevators and talking to your teammates and having short cutscenes. And so what you're dealing with for the most part,
This game brought back riding elevators?
yeah, there are a lot of elevators.
Oh my
a lot of
God,
them.
yes.
Yes. Oh, you got to go from one place to the other, Tavin. In fact, there's one moment, and this is very 40K, since things are so big, you can take maybe an hour to walk from, that's actually more than an hour to walk from the end of a ship to the other end.
What?
And so, yeah, because scale is big in 40K. And so there's a moment where you go on an elevator ride, and this is kind of the style of 40K that seeps into the game in all the good ways, which is that you go on this elevator, you have a little talk with your guys, and then it goes to black until you're on to the next area. It pops up and says 40 minutes later, and then your elevator arrives at the next location. So it depicts things like that in the 40K universe very well. It's grim dark, as it's called, tone and setting, and it does. It translates this very well with great looking, character designs, environmental designs. The game is extremely pretty, super well detailed, and I think it kind of results in the long load times that the game can have. I know even Phil had some loading that he had to go through on the PS5, on the PC, which is, mine's pretty advanced. I also had a lot of problems with that. And yet, that's kind of a small issue. But going back to the multiplayer, the campaign, really, the main enemy you fight are alien-like enemies. Alien as in the alien from the movie Alien. Swarm-like Tyranids, which are just, coming over the hills, charging to your position, and typically in these situations, you've got to fight them off. And this game makes use of something called the swarm mechanic, where you have a large mass of enemies on the screen at any given time. Sometimes they're, running right past you, and you just interact with shooting them, and they, die, but no substantial thing really happens. But most of the time, the horde's coming at you. And so it adds this horde element where you're, for a pretty long period of time, depending on how well you're doing it, fighting off against this encroaching enemy before it gets to you and starts tearing through to you, and you got to switch out into your melee. Which, speaking of the guns, when you're shooting rounds into these large groups of enemies, thankfully, all of the guns feel unique and are very fun to shoot. They feel like they have heavy impacts to them. Whether you're shooting a machine gun that shoots basically, 50 caliber rounds, it really just, has great sound design that makes you feel like you're shooting a weapon of that caliber. And, you have your sidearms as well, your melee weapons that are really fun to get into the fray with. Though the melee weapons and the pistols, your sidearms really, they're kind of lacking. I kind of wish there was more variety. It's kind of strange because you get extra weapons that you don't have access to in the campaign, but you have access to them in the multiplayer. And so it feels like it was kind of a missed opportunity to create more diversity in the amount of weapons you have for something like melee. For example, in the multiplayer, you have a shield that kind of operates like Reinhardt's shield from Overwatch in the sense that it takes a lot of damage and it's able to defend people behind you. It's not in the campaign. Neither is the Power Fist, which kind of sends out shockwaves of attacks when you're punching with it. And it doesn't really seem like there's any reason why these weapons shouldn't be in the campaign. But I guess, for balancing purposes, maybe. I don't fucking know. They decided to not do that. And so a bit of a weird decision on that part, especially when you're so lacking in melee weapons. And pistols, you only have 3 to choose from. And they're nice and diverse, as all the weapons are, but only 3, you feel like they could have done more to have more interesting sidearms. Which, to that end, the future of the game seems to have some sort of a roadmap planned out. It says that it's going to add new enemies. Whether this comes in the forms of new special enemies or an entire new faction is hard to say. Probably just specific types of enemies, since that's a lot easier to do. But in terms of what they have coming down the line, new game modes, new cosmetics, I'm assuming new weapons as well. They have a new game mode called a Horde mode coming out. And so the game does a really good job, the developers do a really good job in laying out a groundwork for what Space Marine is going to be down the line. Because due to the fact that they made a multiplayer game, they don't want to occupy that live service game model, entirely reliant on it. And so they have things like the campaign to, equal that out. But it's clear that they're going to be putting attention into this game down the road, which I'm interested to see what they do exactly with that. But to get back to game feel, you play as a super soldier, a heavily armored one, and you feel like it. From your footsteps to the way that you rip into people with melee and do cool executions on them, interact with the environment as simple as like moving something out of the way. It has weight to it. You feel like a super soldier. And the fact that in the world you'll pass by normal soldiers and they bow down to you, it really does give this sense of awe and feeling like a badass that not only translates to just, you walking around, but also into the gameplay. Beyond that, I actually wrote things down for once.
I like that. You got to check the notes.
I do. Yeah, to get more into the specifics of, first of all, going back to the campaign, it has another type of enemy. They're called the Chaos Space Marines. They come in like the half part of the game, and at a certain point you deal with the Tyranids, and you have them kind of be the final big enemy. They are not as good as the Tyranids. They don't make use really of the swarm mechanic. They're a lot more, enemies that you shoot from a range against. They have powerful ranged attacks, which I saw many of the reviews say that it makes the game a lot more difficult. because they're constantly peppering you from afar while you're having to deal with enemies running up to you on melee. I never found them to be too hard to handle, but they certainly weren't as entertaining to fight as hordes of, melee, aliens, and, while other ones are shooting at you and dealing with hordes of enemies. You just don't have as much to juggle between when you fight this other enemy type. And the foot soldiers, they don't come in such a wide, a wide count. So you're only fighting, a couple enemies that are taking a bit more damage than the average Tyranid. Maybe they have shields. And so it kind of makes it, you get more bogged down in the melee combat with them, which isn't a problem, but it just, by comparison to the other enemy type they had in the game, just doesn't hit as well. And so you do really feel yourself starting to be like, okay, I want to go back to the Tyranids when you're playing that campaign. But once again, you only spend a little bit of time in that campaign. So by the time you're, pretty much done, the game's over, which is always nice. Interesting thing, by the way, is that it recommends you play on veteran mode, which is the hard mode, rather than the normal one. So I ended up doing just that, and it made it a lot more fun.
There's a number of games that do that.
Yeah, I can't really think of them off the top of my head.
Halo does it.
Halo.
Yeah, Halo always says you should play on heroic. I think the Doom games have a recommended difficulty that's on the higher level.
I could see that. Yeah, I could see
there's
them
a
doing
couple other that say, hey, we would, this is normal, but like we want you. The intended difficulty is here.
Yeah,
so not a unique thing, but it's always fun when it pops up. I think I always think it's appreciated.
And I played on normal with Phil. By the way, playing the campaign, I guess this is my biggest criticism of it. Actually, you know what? Originally, my criticism was going to be that it's kind of built in a way where it's made to be played with friends, which is nice because I had the most fun when I was playing with Phil. But on my own, I felt like I died a lot of times when I should have been alive, and that's a large part due to the fact that the way you operate in the game, you go down, your teammates can pick you up, but if you go down again, you get a mortal wound, which means if you go down the next time, you die. And so sometimes I would go into combat encounters where I'd gone through the entire game, the entire mission, dying twice at different intervals, and by the time I died during like the big final moment, I only had basically one life left, and so I just die. And it kind of feels like, oh, I'm supposed to have like other team members there to pick up the slack in those kinds of situations. Now, the thing I found out through operations mode is that in the game, there are these crates that are blended very well into the environment. So well, in fact, I didn't know you could destroy them, and that's how you get things like extra health items. That's where most of them lie. Extra ammo as well, but more importantly, the health. And I realized in that moment, if I had done that, my entire issue with this would have been curbed. So
get good.
And I did get good.
There you go.
Did get good.
There you go.
So it is able to make itself be a campaign that, while it has a heavy multiplayer focus, you can do it on your own pretty well. Next, I'll go into operations, which is the thing I had the least involvement in playing, which I'm disappointed in because it's very cool. They play like campaign missions. They're actually kind of set up alongside the campaign. When new operations get released in the future, which once again, they've already had a roadmap planning that out, I'll be interested to see what they do going forward, because it is limited to being alongside that campaign. But it's very cool. I think of Vermintide when I play it, in the sense of it's set up like that game is. Some of you might get a more relatable comparison with Left 4 Dead. You get, some random generated, enemies that are thrown into a pre-generated map. And so it makes every single gameplay experience a little bit different. Sometimes you'll get ambushed by basically the stealth enemy that the Tyranids have. Sometimes you'll fight the other enemy where otherwise you would be fighting Tyranids. And so it adds that little bit of, what's going to happen next during this playthrough. That always makes subsequent ones entertaining. And there is progression in operations mode. You have perks that you unlock that make it, a little bit easier to go up to higher difficulty missions, because I can't remember the grade at which it goes on, but it can get pretty difficult. Even the minimal one, you can feel at times getting overwhelmed pretty easily. And so those perks can kind of help make that a bit smoother of a transition. It has a class system rather than just you have two weapons, a main ranged weapon, a sidearm, and a melee weapon. You instead just have classes that have certain features centered around them, and these classes are also found in the Eternal War mode. You have ones like your shield guy who has a shield and a melee weapon and just a pistol. They serve as your like frontline fighter. You have your heavy class, which is they have access to weapons that in the campaign are just ones you pick up. You use them like a heavy bolter, which is basically just your minigun equivalent. You use up the ammo and then you toss it to the side. The heavy class allows you to use those weapons, but as the base weapon, so you continuously use it. So it occupies that heavy class. You have your sniper. You have your vanguard who go ahead and kind of scout and can handle themselves and get out of situations pretty well. You have your assault unit who has a jetpack and they can come down and smash into the earth into your enemies. Very melee focused class, and so you choose these ones when you go into operations mode, and it has a nice each person has their role and they fulfill it to the best of their needs, to the best of their abilities, and so playing around with team comp would be pretty interesting, especially when you get to the higher difficulty of operations, because like I said, I only played a little bit and it was the lower level of difficulty, but I can tell it'll get hard, to whatever like I said, I can't remember the grade of difficulty that the game provided. But you also get cosmetics that you unlock, which is always nice. The cosmetics, though, the cool thing about 40K is that you have Space Marine chapters. And the cool thing in this game is that you have, armor paint jobs to make them look like that, but each faction kind of has their own style to it, and sometimes their own style of armor, their own, fetishes that they attach to themselves.
I was going to say, talk to me about this part, because surely this game would have a customization, but whenever I look at a Space Marine, they all kind of look the same. It's just the amount of noise that's on their blue outfit. So, is it actual in-depth customization, or how does that look or work?
Well, see, that depends, because the chapters in this one you play as the Ultramarines. They're the poster boy, and as poster boys typically are, the most boring, the most generic, and so it kind of waylays those more interesting factions in slew of, promoting their poster boy. And that shows in the cosmetics. So, for example, my favorite faction are the Space Wolves. They're Viking-like enemies. They have things like wolf pelt cloaks, wolf helmets, different kind of animal parts like runic armor as well. Just slightly different styles like that. You have the Dark Angels, who are a knightly monastic order, and they have hooded robes on their power armor. They have a lot of crosses, a lot of incense holders, which you know what those are? They're
the smell things.
Yeah. And they have that cool knight aesthetic to them. You have the Mongol-like tribe in the form of the White Scars.
Oh, okay.
You have a lot of different things that you can, add cool cosmetics in them, and I think they're going to do that down the line.
Now, I'm sorry. These are things that you're taking into things like the multiplayer and the operations mode, but not the campaign?
Yes. The campaigns, you're just Ultramarine.
You're set characters. So do co-op companions, they take over other characters in the squad?
Yeah, that's the thing. The operations goes alongside the main campaign, so you actually see the guys who are the operations guys, the generic ones.
Okay.
And they all have their own characters and whatnot, and you just put different skins on them. And, they're not ones who have a lot of character. They have character, but it's not so much that they're having lots of dialogue, and you're really getting to know
these are who
your
co-op guys are playing as?
Yes.
So it's the equivalent of Halo, player 1 plays Master Chief, and then 2 will play Arbiter, and 3 will just play an Elite.
Yeah, well, in the main campaign, each of your squad mates, the main characters, look slightly different in various ways. In terms of the multiplayer, they just look different. They have very specific designs because they are their own characters as well, but you can customize them individually for each class.
Okay, and in campaign, who were your friends playing as?
Your other Space Ultramarine guys.
In the squad. So, the squad, characters in the story.
Yes.
Okay.
The only time that changes is in operations and the...
Where you play as your created character.
Yes.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, effectively your created character.
Or your customized character.
Yes, customized character.
Okay, yeah.
Different skins.
Is it presets of heads or whatever that you're playing as? Or is everybody just helmeted up?
No, presets of they look individually. They look unique. The base models.
So it's you can play Asian dude, black dude, white dude.
Yeah. Or then you can just go into the random armor and color paints and whatnot,
and then
that you unlock.
Throw a helmet on or something.
Yeah, which, like I said, they didn't take advantage of other factions that much. So there's nice cosmetics, not only just colors and decals and whatnot, but it's tiny little character alterations to your helmet or your main armor body, the main part of your armor or whatnot.
Gotcha.
But they could use a lot more. And that's something they'll do down the line. But for right now, I'm like, well, you might want to put more in there so you can have more to do in these multiplayer modes. Because the last thing I'll touch on is the Eternal War mode, your traditional multiplayer. It's very fun. That's the most reminiscent of the old days of multiplayer, where you just hop in, you play, a simple multiplayer game. This one has a bit of structure to it. Those classes I was talking about before in operations, they're in Eternal War mode. There can be each position can be held by 2 players, and so there is a bit of team structure to it. But for the most part, each one just has pros and cons. They counter certain units more than others and whatnot. But it's not very restrictive, and so you just do whatever you feel is the most fun to play, and you just go in there and you scrap with people. You trade a lot. It kind of reminds me of Halo. Do you remember when Halo? There were a lot of moments where you're not exactly like always going on big kill sprees. You're usually like killing somebody in melee, and then you're the next one to fall.
Getting third party.
Goes on. Yeah. This one, it plays like that. And so you jump back in super quick, and so you're right back in the fight.
I like things like that.
Yeah, that's why it's super fun, and you feel like that badass Space Marine in the campaign translated over to multiplayer, but everyone else is also in that.
God, this game seems like so much fun.
It's literally just fun. Yeah. It is a game that pretty much anybody can pick up and entertain themselves with. And, not many games can do that nowadays.
So, now, Connor.
Yeah.
You keep talking about how this game feels like an older game, but still modern. I would assume it still feels good to play, stuff like that. Yeah. But it feels like in how it's structured, campaign, multiplayer, co-op, mission type third mode, right? They've laid out some type of ground plan, some type of like forward thinking plan of like adding more cosmetics or more game modes and things like that right there. We live in the age of the live service.
Yeah.
We live in the age of a games of service game. Do you see this game having legs? Do you see this game having a future? Or do you see this game being a very niche thing that you'll have a dedicated couple hundred, maybe 1,000 plus players, but it's going to be a small pool that just kind of limps along?
It really comes down to audience capture in the form of the modes that you can play and the cosmetics. Not only in just extra operations missions, but also in the Eternal mode, you have your typical team deathmatch. You have your capture the zone, and then the other one, I'm struggling to remember what the difference of it was. I think it's like you're pushing their line.
Okay.
I can't remember. Fuck. I played the least of that one, but it's only those 3. And they're nice, but in terms of longevity, they need to add on to that, which, like I said, it seems like they're going to. It's a matter of can they do it in time when they still have people's attention. I think it's very possible because, like I said, it's just a natural, fun, get in if you want and get out multiplayer mode.
Because they have some attention. They have some.
Do. Yeah,
like it's on my TikTok feed. Yeah. It's like, hey, people are like, hey, this is like a fun, like old Gears of War style game, and I'm enjoying it, like type thing. So like, it's definitely like, I think this is one of the bigger looks that a Warhammer game has ever gotten. And it certainly
probably.
Yeah, and it certainly looks good and it looks fun. I'm just curious as to like, is this a fun for the weekend type thing, and then everybody will move on, or is this something that might have some legs?
It might have some legs.
It might.
Oh yeah, definitely might. No doubt about that. I can't say for certain that it's going to continue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, here's my question: is I assume you're in the same boat with me with a Helldivers 2, for example.
Yeah.
I think these two games are kind of comparable in that sense. Whereas, like, as soon as Helldivers 2 has a big major drop, I'm going back to it, and I'm going to check out what's new and all these things like that. Does Space Marine 2 feel like it could have a big major drop that could bring back?
Oh, yeah.
Not just you, but a fan base.
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
You think so?
Yeah, because, like, it seems like they're pretty ambitious for what they're exactly doing down the line. Since right now, like I said, they're doing the whole new Horde mode.
Yeah.
They undoubtedly have more modes for operations coming in, more levels. And those have a lot of replayability due to the perk system and the unlock system of, gaining different types of weapons and whatnot. Really, it depends on how much they expand that and how quickly they can. The reason why I think it has legs is because they do have an idea. Something like Helldivers 2, since you bring it up, they kind of were just in a spot where they didn't know it was going to blow up as much as it did, and so they weren't super prepared for it. These guys seemed like they did, so it seems like they have some skin of the game in wanting it to continue.
Well, it's also not successful to the level of Helldivers 2.
It's not, no.
So a bit of apples and oranges, but I see your point.
Yeah.
I mean, I brought the comparison in the first place, anyways. But yeah, okay. Well, it certainly seems fun. I wish I had time to play it, man.
Yeah, you would enjoy it a lot.
Yeah, I really feel like I would, but yeah.
Bad news about it.
What's that?
This is actually I was thinking about, if I play more operations, I could say this is an amazing game.
Okay.
But what certainly prevents it from being that right now is the Eternal War mode is not cross-platform. And it advertises itself as it. It could do it in campaign, it could do it in operations, but not Eternal War mode. So I'm guessing they'll add that later on when they can, but it's very strange why they can't have that.
Got to be something with the servers and the way, because it's correct me if I'm wrong, this is like a numbers-based thing. So, like, do you join a faction or something? Or?
Yeah, you have your basic Space Marines, and then you have your Heretic Astartes, who are the traders, and they have their own cool style to them. They don't... side tangent, they have, like, very little... I don't think really any cosmetics available to them. So that's another
These
side
are other
really
players you're fighting, though?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Do you join a side? You pick a side?
No, you automatically get put in one. Like, is that what you're asking? Or
yes, because I assume this is a game mode in which, like, there's a state of the war type thing, and it pushes and pulls based off of players. No. Oh, okay. Well, then I don't know what this is. Then.
Yeah. It's just factions. You know. So why'd you bring that up? What was the?
Well, is it like it? I don't understand the concept of this mode. Then.
Oh, it's just like Eternal War. That one.
Yes.
It's just classic multiplayer. Classic get in, get out, fun multiplayer. You
know, but it's just not but there's no like overarching system like you're pushing this front of the war or anything or this faction's winning, this faction's not type thing. Okay. So like, are you just always on the Space Marine side and then to the enemy side, who to you are the enemies, but to them you're the enemies?
Well, the whole other enemy side are like, their style is completely different. They look a lot more evil. Like they're the evil. Okay,
but are you hopping between sides?
Yeah. It just randomly puts you, it's like, okay, this time you're on the bad guy's side.
Gotcha.
Go whatever. You know, it's like
this time you're red team, this time you're blue team.
Yeah, like I said, it's not trying to be reinventing the multiplayer space. They just know what fun multiplayer is, and they're trying to continue with that.
But operations and campaign are crossplay. That mode's not.
Yes.
Weird.
Very weird. Yeah. And I tried looking it up, and they never addressed it. It was just like...
Guess they just don't have it yet? Or,
yeah.
Interesting. All right. Well, anything else you want to add on to Space Marine 2 before we close it out, buddy?
No, nothing. That's it.
It's a great game. It's an 8 out of 10. Very fun
10,
times.
Yeah.
I wish I had the time to play it. I really do, but I got to move on to the next one and the next one and the next one.
So it goes.
It's very frustrating because it looks a lot of fun, and it looks up my alley. So, yeah, I hope one day I'll be able to have some time to play it, but I doubt I will. So, ladies and gentlemen, this, of course, has been your TwoPennyGames review for Space Marine 2. Thank you so much for watching and listening. Make sure you like, subscribe, and leave your opinions of Space Marine 2 down in the comments below. And until next time, have a great time. Connor, say goodbye to the people.
Goodbye.